Nobody's born incredible. People who do incredible things simply took the right steps. This is our journey. This is the hunt for incredible. On today's show, we have David Puckett. David's the drummer of a band called We Came as Romans. They have over 1 billion streams across platforms and 2.3 million monthly listeners on Spotify alone. They had a sold-out headlining tour through both the US and Australia that did so well that they ended up creating a part 2 of the US tour. So tickets for that are still available. Be sure to check it out if you haven't already. David is also an investor of 13 companies ranging from startups to growth stage companies, one of which is Cerebro. Now, Cerebro is a tech company that David and I are both invested in. That's actually how we connected. And the founder of Cerebro, Ryan Gerardo, was actually the first guest on this show. So you can check out episodes 1 and 2 to catch that. He talks about how he raised capital from Mark Cuban and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. Now, on top of all of this, David is the founding CEO of Hyperculture Marketing Group. It's a marketing agency that works with artists like Alicia Keys, Megan Thee Stallion, Motley Crue, Death Row Records. The list goes on and on. Super incredible roster. In this episode, we talk about how David approaches risk, his story of how he got into music and started his marketing agency. And what's really great about this episode is that David is getting involved with things that have an inherently higher risk profile than most people are accustomed to. So being a musician, being an entrepreneur, investing in startups, and so on. So in the episodes, we get to tease out how he evaluates risk, how he thinks about making big decisions like that, and a whole bunch of other cool stuff. So I'm super excited to share this episode with you. I hope you enjoy it. David, welcome to the show.
What's up, my man? Thank you so much for having me. I've been really excited about this.
Yeah. Super stoked to have you. All right. So I would love to kick things off with a brief intro into how you got into music and what your thought process was around taking that risk, taking that leap to go into it full time.
Yeah, man. I honestly was kind of born into it. Both my parents had their heydays as touring musicians, not to the touring schedule or extent that I'm currently doing it and have been for 15 years. But, it was frequent for me to grow up and mom would be gone for a weekend or a week at a time on tour with her band, or dad would be gone for a couple weeks with his. And my sister was a classically trained pianist, so there was just always music around. I was, I think, 13 or 14 when I listened to the album All Killer No Filler by the band Sum 41. And that album made me want to start my own band. I'd already been playing piano and guitar and drums at that point. 14, I think I was in middle school or freshman in high school or something. And just started having friends over and jamming. My third band started to, play a lot of shows locally. We were juniors in high school, I think. In our senior year, we blew up on MySpace. We were all doing the Friend Blaster Pro thing. This would have been 2007 to 2008. And we ended up getting a contract from a major record label. And we were young and dumb and naive and stupid. And we just saw the other bands that we looked up to on the label and didn't even have a lawyer, looked at it and just signed it and thought that we had made it. And were met with the harsh reality that once you sign a contract to a record label, you're now responsible for becoming a local band in every city across the country. So we started touring full time. I was still 17 at the time. And a lot of it was just DIY touring, just reaching out to other local bands in a different market and figuring out if they could put us on maybe a local show that they were headlining. A lot of VFW halls, a lot of playing to 10 to 12 to 15 people a night, a lot of dumpster diving for food. But over time, building up the fan base for sure. And after a few years, we started to get better tour offers and all that fun stuff. So initially, my intent in touring wasn't to have a career in it. I just wanted to go on some tours in a band and see what that was like while I was figuring out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And, over the years of leaving that first band and joining a bigger band that we had previously opened up for on tour, and then being with that band until we broke up the end of 2016, and then joining the band that I'm now in, that my middle band previously opened up for on tour, have been very, very fortunate to have the right doors open and the right opportunities at the right time, and that I was prepared to kind of take advantage of those opportunities when those doors opened. So this is year 15 of me touring full time. I'm 33, so it's kind of to an extent all that I've known as an adult. COVID was the longest that I've been home since I was 17. which was kind of a nice change of pace, and also kind of gave me the ability to answer that question that a lot of touring folks end up developing when they've been doing it for a minute of, do I really still want to do this or not? And for me and the rest of the guys in my band, it was a resounding yes after being forced to take a break for almost 2 years. So yeah, that was kind of how I fell into it. It wasn't intentional, but for most folks, it's not something they can do forever. And so I definitely want to do it while I can. There's not many jobs out there that pay you to travel the world with your best friends and play music. So definitely just excited about where the band's at and the opportunities that we have, and want to see how far we can take it.
Yeah. So it's almost like your risk tolerance was adjusted from childhood because your parents were in music. And so for you, it wasn't even this big, scary, risky thing. It was just a very feasible route that you could have gone down.
For sure, man. I would say, I grew up very privileged, not financially, right? We were like, I'd say lower middle class. We never missed a meal, right? But like, we weren't going on vacations every year. And whenever we were, it was to like the Sea Mist Resort in Myrtle Beach. And if you just Google Maps it and look at their like 1.6 star rating, it's not the coolest spot, right? But the context in which I grew up very privileged was like, both of my parents are just incredible humans. They're unbelievably supportive, and they were unbelievably supportive of my sister and I both pursuing music in whatever context that looked like, as well as anything else we were interested in. And so I think with like, having a model set in front of me of parents that were both musicians and parents that had made a living doing that, I didn't really have that crazy risk. And I was also just a young, naive teenager who kind of fell into it. And by the time I was starting to get my shit together as an adult, like my band was already established. And I was at that point where, I was making enough money to live off of year over year, but was only touring 5 or 6 months out of the year. So the rest of the time that I had home, I had all the time in the world to just explore other opportunities and avenues. So my risk tolerance was definitely a lot higher than it is now, for sure. Now I've got more people that are relying on me and more things that I'm responsible for. But my risk tolerance was definitely, I wouldn't even say that I had like a risk to reward in my decision-making factor. It was just like, oh, that sounds cool. Let's give it a shot and see what happens.
Yeah.
Definitely bit me in the ass a few times, but it worked out in many others.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you iterate and you're learning from those times it's biting you in the ass, you're good, right?
Yeah.
I read a really interesting study that said something like people's childhood acclimate them to the environments that they're comfortable in once they're adults. So it was something like 9 out of 10 entrepreneurs grew up in environments that were prone to a higher risk tolerance or more chaotic. Sure. So like my background, for example, my mom, she's a saint of a woman, but she was very consistently late to picking me up. She's Latin. She's from Brazil. So still a saint, habitually late. And so I very often was trying to, how do I say this? I was very often like trying to operate and create structure around my own life as a child. And so now that I'm older, being in chaotic environments, I'm wildly comfortable, sometimes even too comfortable, to the point where I have to ask myself, am I creating this chaos because it excites me, or is this, externally induced chaos that I can operate within and create structure around to bring order from that chaos. So it's interesting hearing your story. My parents, actually, they both met in art school. They're both musicians as well. Nice. And so for me growing up, I didn't view the artistic fields as high risk as a lot of other people. So it's interesting that you didn't view it that way as well. It's also super cool that you had established yourself before it sounds like you had to make that leap. So you mentioned your band already started making traction before you had to make that difficult decision of like, okay, do I take a leap on something that might not work, or do I go a safer route? Like by the time you really had to ask yourself that question, you had enough traction with your band to say like, okay, this actually is not as high risk as if I was starting the band later on.
Correct. Yeah, I was 22 when I started to make, not a crazy amount of money, right? But enough money to live. I was probably making 50, 60 grand a year at the time, right? Which for a 22-year-old who's just touring the world playing drums, it's pretty cool. And so at that point, that's when I was starting to try and figure out I had a lot of friends at that point that were really having some mental health issues in the touring space. You end to this, we'll say, diminishing return. You end up getting cornered where when you're trying to quote unquote adult, right? Let's say you're settling down and having kids, your perspective of home changes. A lot of people that are drawn to like my arena of the touring world in the hard rock space and the alternative subculture space wanted to start touring to get away from home, or to just figure out what was out there, and, you know, experience the world and all of that. And then they fall in love and settle down. And now home has a different meaning. And now they want to provide for home, right? They want to provide for their significant other. They want to provide for their kid. But the only way that they know how to do that is through being away from them on tour. You sacrificed all of your ability to go get a degree or go to a trade school and develop another skill set and another ability to drive revenue for yourself through being on tour 8, 9, 10 months out of the year. And so they're stuck kind of in this catch-22 scenario of, man, I finally made it to my touring life and I really want to do this. Touring is not a crazy lucrative career until you're selling about 3,000 to 4,000 tickets a night, especially if your band is equally owned between all 3, 4, 5, 6 members. Everyone's paid on a gross commission before you get to like participate in net profit. So you've got management taking 15% of gross, booking agent taking 10% of gross, business management taking 5% of gross. The local venue that you're playing at is taking 15 to 20% of your gross merchandise sales every day. Then you have to factor in your touring crew and what you're paying them. Then you have to factor in your operating expense. And then you have to factor in your cost of goods on merchandise sold. So like at the end of the day, you can generate a shit ton, but the paycheck that you're getting at the end of the tour is too much. And so I had a lot of, you know, band friends that home, the definition of home for them changed, but they didn't know what else to do. I want to provide for my family, but the only way I can do that right now is through being away from them. And I don't have the ability to take 6 to 9 to 12 months off to go through a trade school and figure out something else and start my life over. And they just started having crazy mental health issues. And that's where I would start to see, you know, a lot of alcoholism kick in, a lot of drug use kick in, a lot of just, you know, terrible coping mechanisms for people. And so I was, you know, kind of fortunate to be in that environment and see that happen as a very naive early 20-year-old where I'm like, well, right now my band's doing pretty good and I'm making money, but I'm on a massive tour seeing all these people have all these issues. And I don't want to find myself in that position 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And so at that point was when I really started to focus on like the personal development world. And I ended up going through like an MBA accelerator and just a bunch of as many conferences and courses and whatever as I could, trying to figure out what other arenas of life I wanted to explore. And, you know, I think the biggest privilege that I had there was when I was on tour 5, maybe 6 months out of the year at that time. And the rest of the time at home, I could fully immerse myself into whatever it is I was interested in. And so I kind of learned from like negative example and proximity there of just unfortunately seeing so many peers of mine and friends of mine in the music industry dealing with serious mental health issues and addiction problems and suicide and overdoses and everything else. But I was like, man, I don't want to find myself in that position. So what can I do now and how can I leverage my time to set myself up for, you know, freedom, you know, and kind of success in whatever way you want to define that.
Yeah. It's like one of my favorite quotes. A smart person learns from their mistakes, but a truly wise person learns from the mistakes of others. Like that ability to observe people around you and notice how they're operating within the world and the return that they get from operating that way, and then adopting and pulling the lessons from them you get a far greater ROI on your time when you are learning from the mistakes of other people or just learning from other people in general, whether it's a mistake or something that they did well. So is that, it sounds like that's what catalyzed the transition or the thought of starting a marketing agency and investing in companies. Can you tell us more about that and how you manage your time with touring?
Yeah, man. I would say the marketing agency honestly wasn't even an intentional thing. That was the start of me like stepping into like quote unquote entrepreneurship, right? I have another company that is very much so turned into a passion project, and I'm in the process of pulling in a couple partners right now. But my first company was an education platform, was a webinar platform. We'd bring artists on in the music industry and have them host 3-day immersive style webinar clinic. And it was just me figuring my shit out one step at a time, right? Like the back end infrastructure of the company from a tech perspective was just duct taped together and like terrible, but I figured it out one step at a time. And the advisors, I wouldn't even say advisors, I'd say mentors that I had at the time, we had identified that like paid social was primarily going to be the way to scale that company. And so I just went through as many online courses and went to as many conferences as I could, and really just tried to absorb as much information as I could about, paid social advertising, and started to excel in that arena. I then wanted to get into the brick and mortar space. I love coffee shops. I love coffee culture. The whole third wave movement is something I'm really passionate about. And I love co-working facilities. When I'm on tour, that's typically what I end up finding as a local co-working spot every day. And so I ended up joining up with a couple other folks and was part of a co-working startup. And this would have been like 2017 to early 2019. And we were doing it all the wrong ways, right? Like none of us had gone through like a formal raise before. We were trying to put together a board of advisors, but we were trying to raise a sizable amount of cash on essentially like a friends and family round. It was a really, really aggressive deal. And so we ended up, the folks and I that were in it lost a good amount of money together, and it wasn't necessarily money that we had at the time. But I had this skill set in marketing. And so I had turned people down for quite a while that had, local businesses or other bands, et cetera, that had asked for help in that space, and ended up just saying yes to those opportunities. And, fortunately enough, over the years now, like identified a really big wedge in the market that we've dominated. And, now it's a multi-million-dollar, marketing agency with 10 full-time folks, all salaried, benefits, the whole nine. We've got a really freaking cool team. Really, really fortunate that I've been able to like put the folks together that we have that are all way smarter and more brilliant than me. But so that was kind of how I stumbled into hyperculture. I worked a lot in the consulting space on the D2C side of things for a while as like a stopping point to just make a living for myself outside of the band and all of that, and just realized that there was a big data gap in the music industry, and really kind of pivoted that consulting arm to turn hyperculture into what it is now. As far as time management, when I'm on tour, man, everyone asks this question, and it's really funny to me because most people think when you're on tour, you're busy as hell. You're really not, right? Like, and I will say with where we're at as a band right now, I'm very fortunate that we're even way less busy for the band members than we were previously. Like we have a full crew that handles load in. I've got a drum tech that builds my drums and tears those down and changes my drum heads and everything. So like my day in and day out responsibilities on tour are sound check, which takes a whopping 10 to 15 minutes most days. We play like line check everything, play one, maybe two songs. We have a VIP meet and greet that normally is at like 6 p.m. every day. And that lasts for 1 hour. And then we normally play from like 10 to 11 each night, which is way after like working hours anyways. And so when you really look at it, I've got, let's factor in half an hour, full hour before the set and a full hour after, like a 3-hour block there. And then VIP meet and greet 4 hours. And let's say sound check took 30 minutes. In a normal 24-hour day, my time is committed to about 4.5 hours at an absolute max for all things band related when I'm on. Even when, I didn't have a drum tech and I was setting up my own drums and helping crew load in and load out, load in normally takes 15 minutes, load out normally takes maybe an hour total, from like band plays the last note on stage to getting everything broken down, all the production, everything packed up in the semi or the bus trailer or whatever. Setting up my drums takes 15 minutes. I can do it in 4 if I'm really, really in a hurry. I've timed myself a few times because I'm curious. I think a lot of people assume, man, you're on tour, you must be so busy with that you don't have time. When in reality, like, dude, being on tour is a lot of sit up and wait. You have a lot of 5 or 10 minute things to do here, but you still have a lot of time in the day. I think what ends up happening a lot of the time when folks are on tour is they end up staying up way too late. Sleeping on a bus sucks. Sleeping in a van is even worse. Like a bus is luxurious. I'm very thankful for it, but you're still in a coffin going 70 down the highway, right? You can still feel any bump the bus is hitting. You wake up a few times a night, but people end up staying up super late. They're partying, they're whatever. No shade on that, dude. I have my nights, once a week or so here on tour too. But then you end up sleeping in super late. And then you eat like crap because typically most venues are in the coolest parts of each city. And so you've got all of like the coolest restaurants to go to and all the coolest bars and all the coolest breweries. And so you just end up crap in, crap out, which creates this like negative feedback loop or like this downward spiral of like, well, you're not properly energized because you're not properly nourished. And then you end up staying up late because you're running off of like, the social level that everyone's at and the energy that's on the bus there. And then you drink more than you should have. And then you get a bad night's sleep on the bus. And then you wake up late. And then what are you craving when you're tired? You're normally looking for something that's heavy in like carb, sugar, and fat because it gives you that quick burst of energy. So you eat like crap again and then keeps going. So I'm very fortunate that like my bandmates, most of us are really health conscious. We bring out like a mobile kind of gym setup with us when we're on tour, and a few of us do like circuit training almost every day. We bring a portable ice bath with us and do cold therapy every day on tour. Our vocalist was actually went to culinary school and is an incredible chef. So like a lot of the time, a few of us go in and get groceries together, and he'll like cook for everyone, and then we'll just meal prep. And we just try to be as mindful as possible of that. So like when I'm on tour, I'm still normally up at 8:30 a.m. every day. And I find a coffee shop or a co-working space near the venue and just kind of go post up. And I'll normally work in like 2-hour increments. So I'll do like 2 hours of just emails or execution, or most of my time spent on the company right now is like client relationships and strategy calls with our clients. And my admin who runs my schedule tries to keep me, when I'm on tour, no more than 3 hours a day on phone calls. When I'm at home, it's normally like 5 or 6. And so I'll do like 2 hours and then give myself a break for whatever else to kind of go refresh and be inspired, whatever. And then another 2 hours. And then that break is normally like for sound check. And that's when I'll eat. I try to stick to an intermittent fasting schedule when I'm on tour. So sound check and eat, and then another 2 hours and then break. I'll do VIP. After VIP, the workday is typically done. So that gives me time to like catch up on anything that I'm late on or that I haven't been able to tackle yet without the distraction of like phone calls or whatever else. So that's like execution based work or catching up on emails or blah, 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 whatever. And then I still have time to like go out with the guys for a drink before we warm up and whatever. So it's really like I end up in a weird way actually having more time when I'm on tour than I do at home, because I don't have like the social life that I'm trying to keep up with, and like trying to hang out with my friends when I'm at home or like see family. I don't have like, my dogs used to tour with us. They don't anymore because they're getting a little too old. So I don't have to like take my dogs on like their 2-mile walk every day. When I'm at home, I kick my own ass when it comes to like rehearsal. I'll like play through our set in a sauna suit with ankle weights on each leg. And then I'll do like an extra 7 or 8 songs. So I'm actually playing drums longer than I am when I'm on tour, and I don't want to piss my neighbors off. So like I drum as early as possible in the day. So in a weird way, like when I'm on tour, I'm removed from a lot of distraction. I know that I have to go on stage and play the set later that night. In order to do that, I need to like work out a little bit every day and eat well. And other than that, I've got all the time in the world for the most part to really still focus on work. I would say the other side that I mentioned earlier is like, dude, my team, I've been so fortunate to meet the folks that have joined Hyperculture and like really build out the community that we have. And I have a hard time delegating, but that's where a lot of my time and a lot of my like uncomfort zone and a lot of like we'll say intentional time that I've put myself in is learning how to delegate well. Identifying strong suits that our team members have and like fully supporting them and being autonomous and passing that workload over to them to free me up to be the most effective where I can be to benefit the company, which is really on like sales, client relationships, and then the critical thinking and kind of strategic side of coming up with marketing initiatives and plans. I don't necessarily need to be the person that's out there building the ads, right, or building the CRM platform for a client. Our team members are way better than I am at that.
You made a comment earlier on around hiring people, bringing people on who are smarter than you in those various fields. That is so incredibly valuable. I always tell everybody that I bring onto my team, I'm bringing you on for you to tell me what to do, not for me to tell you what to do. So bringing on those experts who can really shape and deliver more value than I would be able to, or you would be able to. The second thing is, you seem to have a really great knack for observing your environment and then making moves based on what you're noticing and teasing out. So seeing what naturally gains traction. So you've commented a couple times around how you kind of fell into music, or you kind of fell into this marketing agency, as opposed to being so intensely thought driven and saying like, I want to create a marketing agency, and then forcing it, right? Noticing where is there a natural give? What experience do I have? What does my tool belt look like that will set me up for the success? And then noticing, oh, I'm good at marketing. I'll just keep rolling with this, and so on. Which has been really valuable for me in my life. And it sounds like you're killing it there too. The third thing is the discipline, the micro discipline that you say, okay, I'm not going to go out and drink every night. I'm not going to go out and eat all the best, restaurants that aren't as healthy for me, but actually being disciplined in those small things that creates the opportunity for success in the bigger thing, which is really difficult to do. I was talking to Jackie, my wife, the other day, because we've been waking up a lot earlier every morning. We spent a month over in Italy, and once we came back with the time zone shift, we said, we have to take advantage of our sleep cycle naturally shifting.
And so just stick with it.
Let's stick with this super early every morning, being disciplined, and realize that waking up early isn't the hard part. That gets all the attention because it's the most painful part. So it's the easiest to talk about as being difficult. The hard part is actually going to bed early. If you can go to bed early consistently every night, then waking up early is a cinch. It's the difficulty is in creating that drive internally, that internal compulsion to do something, as opposed to the external compulsion, which might be your alarm clock or somebody bugging you about a deadline that's forcing you to do it, right? If you can come up with that internal desire and drive to move yourself forward, everything else in life will be easier and fall into place. The fourth thing that you commented that stands out to me is your ability to organize your time into focused blocks while still leaving space for creativity. So you mentioned 2 hours of hyper-focused work where you're crushing that work, and then you leave a space for, you commented on inspiration and creativity. Having that space is so valuable for letting your mind relax and then think laterally and be more creative, which I'm sure has attributed to a lot of your success. There's a great book called Who Not How that talks about that, and talks about bringing people on your team so that you can create the space to think laterally. Another thing you mentioned that I love, and this is where I definitely have a question for you, is how you delegate that work out, even though it's difficult. I think it's difficult for everybody who is a self-starter and loves creating and driving things forward. You need that skill of execution to get the ball rolling. Everybody needs that to get the ball rolling. And it's tricky because that same skill that got the ball rolling is the thing that you have to give up to somebody else, to give up that control and moving the ball yourself.